Hi everyone, and welcome back if you've seen other videos or shorts. Felt like I never gave a proper introduction, so hi. Call me Blue Daisy. I am not a beginner artist, but until now, I have been more shy about recording my artwork. In most of the pieces that I create, there's a small story behind each one of them. For this painting, I imagined a small island, maybe somewhere off towards the north where there'd still be snow on the mountains. Yet the woodland and the fields would start to have already gone green and leafy, and maybe even have flowers everywhere. I also pictured a small stream cutting through the land until it reached a small thicket. Here the water would pool, and it would create a small safe space for the smaller animals of the woodland to gather safely, such as deers or squirrels, or maybe even some chipmunks. Not knowing where exactly the stream would cut through, I had painted extra area on the canvas for water. And I definitely used the Bob Ross technique to get a light trail that goes through the middle of the water. I forgot to mention earlier that I'm using acrylics and not oils. The brand I use is mostly an opaque hue of different paints, and yeah, I have to layer them a good bit to get strong, deep colors at times, especially if I were to use a black canvas. But on a white canvas, it sticks out pretty good, I think. By now, you probably can also tell I'm having trouble not covering the mic. I'm also having a little bit of trouble not shifting the canvas around, and I'll have to keep that in mind too. I've already painted many other paintings in the past, and I would love to share a video of the different paintings, though there is no footage of them being done. And paintings of narwhals and fish, dolphins, orcas. I've even done paintings of phoenixes and dragons. There are quite a few of them that are still only half painted, and I could finish them on the channel. I've sped this part up just so that I can get past the mountains a little faster because I take a little more time to define my lights and my darks in my mountains. Normally, I would use a painting knife to do the snowdrifts, but because this is a smaller canvas, I've chosen to do the small paintbrush. And as you can see, I picked up a little dark red, and it has now tinged all the white paint into this muddy color, because there's also a small bit of a light teal color. Now, I wanted to use that as actually the shadow, but because of the pinky red hues, I decided this would now be the light face of the mountain. I began painting in all the shadowy parts of the mountain range because I had noticed the marbling of the darker color on my brush. So instead of wasting it, I decided to put it to good use. Sadly, at this point, I know that the mountain range would be cut into by the tree line that I wanted to add to separate the area. So I didn't pay too much attention to the detail here. However, I did want to add some of the snowy reflections into the water. After a moment of looking at the mountains, I decided to go back in on the ridge and redefine just a little bit more area of where the sun would hit and to mix the paint in where the red was still a little too much for my liking. You can see my shadow moving around as I went up out of frame. I'm sorry about that, guys. I'll have to keep better track of that next time. You can see the tail end of the cloud that I was working on up above. I did speed this part up, but it does sound hilarious to listen to. I'm also using my most favorite brush for trees and skies, and even the mountains. But sadly, after last year, I must have knocked something loose because you can hear it tinking. This was the spot that I realized where I wanted the mouth of the small stream to leave the larger area and come down into the small pond. But I also wanted to add an area where there could be a small waterfall or even a few trickling waterfalls. I had needed a thick dark green or more of a brown base to start with, so as I had shadow to pull the light from for the thicket area. That's why I had to stop and mix some paint off screen. When it wasn't becoming dark enough, I had to also add just a little hint of Mars Black. Again, I've sped up the footage because it just takes a while to get through this part, and if I could move that fast in reality though, man, the work I could get done. For the foreground, I knew I needed straight up black so as to make the bushes stand out a lot more than what the midground was. The excess paint also allowed me to almost carve into it so as to see where I wanted rocks or bush or even a trail. You can see the small gap I left between the rocks and the pathway just on the left side of the pond, but I had decided later off to close that off and add rocks all the way around.